Before we get to specific topics, these are two different candidates, two experienced debaters. I mean, did these two candidates achieve what they had hoped for? And who do you think controlled the debate better?
Well, I think each candidate can point to areas of success. I think obviously part of what tonight was an introduction to the American people to Kamala Harris. A lot of Americans may know of her. They may know of her record. They may have seen her at various points. But tonight was really their first opportunity to hear from her in a really detailed way. So in that sense, I think her introduction was a relatively successful one. Now, that having been said, I think Vice President Mike Pence scored a number of points when he actually talked about the Biden-Harris policy agenda. As your correspondent noted, there were exchanges on taxation, on energy policy, on criminal justice policy, on issues like abortion, which continue to be very controversial in the United States. On all of those issues, what Pence was able to do was essentially to paint the Biden-Harris ticket as a far-left, progressive, very liberal ticket. And in that sense, he achieved the aims of the entire Republican ticket, which is to paint Biden and Harris into this very liberal box to try to make them appear out of touch with many Americans. So in that sense, I think Vice President Pence did what he needed to do tonight. Both candidates can probably claim that they were able to accomplish some things, but in the long run, I think Pence probably had the better debate as far as the campaign goes.
But at the end of the day, it comes down to the audience, doesn't it, Dr. Lanhi? Because we know in this election, for the first time, in recent history, the record amounts of people have already cast their ballots, and many people have already decided. But it's really the swing voters that are undecided. And we didn't get any clarity from the presidential debate. And by the way, Susan Page announcing next week the next presidential debate. Does that neutralize this VP debate that has just happened now that we know the presidential debate is likely to go ahead? Because at the end of the day, those swing voters aren't voting for the VPs. They're voting for the president.
That's right. So the vice presidential debate traditionally has not been watched by nearly as many people. It is of much more limited impact and effect. Basically, the American people want to make sure that two people will be alive and breathing if they need to take over the presidency, which tonight we got plenty of assurance that that was the case. With respect to undecided voters, you're absolutely right in the sense that the number of undecided voters remaining in this election, according to all the public opinion surveys we've seen, is relatively small. There actually are not that many Americans who have not yet made their minds up. At this point, most Americans know how they feel about Donald Trump. It's been long enough. They have an opinion of him. And so really the question is how many of those undecided voters would be persuaded by what they saw tonight? And how many of those actually will end up breaking one way or the other versus simply not voting? I think those are big open questions. But broadly speaking, you are right. Americans are voting. They've been voting for several weeks. And this election, in some ways, is very much underway already. So tonight's debate, I think, has limited impact. We might see more people watching the debate on the 15th of October between Trump and Biden. That may have a little bit more of an impact. But even then, as I said, I think the percentage of voters who have not yet made up their minds is exceedingly small.
All right, and Professor, in recent months, U.S.-China tensions, of course, have been on the rise, and of course, the two candidates have discussed it in length. And here's where the respective candidates stand on what are currently shaky ties with the world's second biggest economy. Let's listen in.
China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China.
The trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war.
Also, Dr. Chen, I mean, Pence there saying that China is to blame for coronavirus, will hold them accountable for it. They vowed to continue to stand strong against Beijing while attempting to sort of paint Biden-Harris as weak, whereas in Harris countered by saying the Trump administration has shot itself in the foot by fighting trade war with China. What did you make of Pence's line of attack there and how Harris responded to it?
Well, what's exceedingly clear is that U.S.-China relations are one of the core issues at play in this year's election. And what you saw from both candidates clearly is a notion that China is not particularly popular in the U.S. right now. So there is political advantage to be gained by potentially attacking China. You saw both candidates kind of go after China in that way. They tried each to make the other candidate sound weak on the issue. And this is, I think, something you're going to see perennially discussed between now and Election Day. There is going to be a tremendous amount of dialogue about who can be tougher on China. In that sense, I think the status quo with respect to U.S.-Sino relations has changed. It's shifted pretty fundamentally to when Barack Obama was president some time ago, when there was probably more consensus around a constructive relationship with China. I think what you see is both candidates, to a certain degree, embracing a much more confrontational view of China, a view of China that is far more skeptical than at any point in recent American history. And I think that is entirely responsive to how the American electorate feels about China at this point in time, particularly in the wake of COVID-19 and how COVID-19 has affected the United States.